It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, dinner simmering on the stove, soft music playing in the background, and me waiting, as I always did, for him to come home. I used to think love meant patience, that devotion was measured in how long you could wait for someone who kept showing up later and later each night. That evening, I noticed something strange, his laughter through the phone. It wasn't the usual tired, forced chuckle of a man returning from work. It was lighter, freer, the kind of laugh that only came from the thrill of something forbidden. My heart clenched, but I brushed it off. Doubt, I told myself, is poison. But sometimes, poison is the only truth that keeps you alive long enough to face the lie. The first crack in the illusion came through a message. Not meant for me. A name I knew too well, my best friend. The one who used to sit at this very table, share secrets, borrow my dresses, and swear she'd always have my back. Seeing their words together, his tenderness, her flirtation, was like watching my entire world split open in silence. Betrayal doesn't arrive like thunder. It seeps in quietly, a whisper that becomes a scream inside your chest. I remember staring at the screen, my breath shallow, my fingers trembling, the scent of the burning food filling the air. My home, my heart, my trust, all burned together that night. But I didn't confront them. Not yet. Rage wanted to scream, but something stronger held me back, clarity. I realized that silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Let them believe I was still blind, still the devoted wife, still the naive friend. Let them laugh, thinking their secret was safe. The world doesn't hand you power. Sometimes you have to stand in the shadows to learn how to use it. Every lie they told me became a lesson in control, every fake smile a reminder that patience is a weapon when wielded by the betrayed. I began to observe the little things, the sudden girls' nights that didn't add up, the perfume that wasn't mine, the unreturned calls. Each clue didn't break me, it built me. I started writing everything down, not out of obsession, but out of awakening. Documentation, details, dates, proof. When you've been made to feel crazy for too long, evidence becomes your salvation. I saw her car outside our favorite cafe one afternoon. His jacket hung over her seat. The same jacket I had gifted him last winter. That moment should have crushed me, but instead, it made me sharper. I wasn't just witnessing betrayal. I was watching the birth of my new self, the woman who would never beg to be loved again. I smiled when he came home that night, pretending not to know. I served dinner, listened to his lies, and matched everyone with a calm nod. My silence made him comfortable, and his comfort made him careless. He started leaving hints, careless trails of guilt disguised as gifts. One night, while cleaning his office drawer, I found an envelope. Inside, a signed paper and a note addressed to my best friend. The paper mentioned a $70,000 transfer. My name appeared only once, as the person who was supposed to never find out. They had planned to use my trust fund money for their dream life together. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, cruel, calculated. That discovery didn't break me, it lit a fire inside me that would never go out. I could have screamed. I could have exposed them that night. But what would that give me? Tears? Sympathy? No. I wanted something deeper, I wanted transformation. I decided to let the betrayal play out, to let them believe they'd won. Because when people think you're broken, they drop their guard. And in that illusion, I found power. My silence became my rebellion, my composure became my disguise. Each morning after that, I looked in the mirror and told myself, don't let them define the end of your story. Let them write the first half in lies, you'll write the rest in gold. That's how it began, the shift, the awakening, the understanding that revenge doesn't always come in shouting or tears. Sometimes, it comes in silence so sharp it cuts deeper than words ever could. I learned that the first step to rebuilding is to stop mourning what died and start preparing for what's about to rise. The envelope with the $70,000 marked the beginning of my transformation, though at first, I didn't even understand its purpose. It sat there in my trembling hands like a piece of poison wrapped in luxury. The note beside it was short, written in his handwriting, the same familiar script that used to fill birthday cards and love notes. But this one wasn't meant for me. It was for her. He called it a gift to start over, a down payment for the life they planned to build together once I was gone. The cruel irony was that the money came from my trust fund, the savings my late father had left me, meant to protect me, not betray me. That realization carved something cold and permanent inside me, the understanding that I had loved a man who could steal not just my heart but my future. At first, the number $70,000 didn't even feel real. I stared at it, whispering it aloud like it might change meaning if I said it differently. 70,000. A fortune and a curse at once. I remember sitting there, the room quiet except for the ticking clock, my reflection trembling in the dark window. How easily they plotted my erasure, how casually they traded loyalty for greed. Yet somewhere in that pain, a strange thought began to bloom. If they could see this money as a way to start over, why couldn't I? Maybe this betrayal wasn't just an ending. Maybe it was an invitation to reinvent everything they thought they'd taken from me. I didn't touch the envelope for days. I kept it hidden, like a secret weapon I wasn't ready to use. But the more I stared at it, the more it began to change meaning in my mind. It was no longer their money, it was mine. My inheritance, my right, my power. And if it was meant to destroy me, then I would turn it into the very thing that built me. Betrayal, I realized, only wins when you let it define your limits. I wasn't going to cry over stolen dreams anymore. I was going to fund my rebirth. The first thing I did was learn. Not about love or forgiveness, but about independence, about business, investment, and the kind of confidence money can't buy but knowledge can create. I spent nights reading, researching, watching videos on how to start a company from nothing. I didn't tell anyone. The silence that once hid my pain now protected my plans. I was no longer the wife waiting for affection. I was the architect of my own comeback. And every time I thought about that $70,000, I saw it differently, not as what they stole, but as what they accidentally gave me. A chance to rebuild on my own terms. I began small, just an idea I could nurture quietly without attention. A design startup, something creative, something that carried a piece of who I used to be before betrayal hardened me. I worked late nights in the same room where I had once waited for him to come home, surrounded by reminders of the life I was leaving behind. The sound of my keyboard became my new heartbeat. The glow of my laptop screen, my only light. Every sale, every client, every small success felt like reclaiming a piece of my stolen dignity. It wasn't easy. There were nights I doubted myself, moments when anger threatened to drown me again. But I learned to turn that anger into energy. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be destructive, it can be productive, empowering, quiet. The same man who thought I couldn't survive without him had unknowingly funded the beginning of my independence. Every time my business grew, I thought about how the $70,000 he meant for betrayal had multiplied into something far greater. Months passed, and I didn't tell a soul what I was building. Not him. Not her. They thought they had erased me, that I had disappeared into silence. In reality, I was rising quietly, steadily, powerfully. I was becoming the woman I had once only dreamed of being, one who didn't need validation, one who didn't seek love through sacrifice. The money had been meant to buy their future, but instead, it purchased my freedom. And when I finally saw my first big profit, I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I simply smiled, remembering the day I found that envelope. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal. It was proof that, even in the darkest moments, destiny leaves you a hidden gift, one that only reveals its power when you stop seeing yourself as broken. That $70,000 wasn't their victory. It was my beginning. The day I chose revenge through success was not a day filled with anger or tears, but with a kind of calm that felt almost foreign. I had spent weeks drowning in betrayal, dissecting every lie, every memory, every word that once felt like love. But one morning, as I stood before the mirror, my reflection looked different. My eyes, once heavy with grief, held something else, determination. I realized I had a choice. I could keep living as the woman they broke, or I could become the woman they never saw coming. That was the moment I decided revenge would not come through destruction, but through creation. I wouldn't chase them, expose them, or waste my breath trying to make them regret what they did. I would rise in silence and let my success speak louder than their betrayal ever could. There's a certain power in quiet ambition. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop trying to make others see your worth, you begin to build differently, I started to see every wound as a blueprint, every disappointment as raw material. The pain that had once paralyzed me began to shape my discipline. I no longer cared to prove them wrong. I cared to prove myself right. It's strange how betrayal can clear your vision, how it strips away illusions and forces you to look at what's left. Beneath the heartbreak, beneath the anger, I found a spark of strength I didn't know existed. I threw myself into work. The design business I had started began to grow, slowly but steadily. Every project became personal, every success a secret form of vengeance. I poured my story into my work, the colors, the patterns, the quiet symbolism of survival hidden behind every creation. Clients didn't know the history behind my passion, they just saw excellence. And that was enough. I didn't need anyone to understand the journey that had brought me here. The satisfaction was internal, a victory that didn't need applause. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about them, my husband and my best friend. Were they happy? Did they ever wonder what happened to me? Did they still believe I was broken? Those thoughts used to sting, but now they fueled me. The best part about success born from betrayal is that it's quiet, but undeniable. You don't have to announce it. It travels. It whispers through the world until it reaches the very people who tried to destroy you. I didn't want to confront them anymore. I wanted them to see my name somewhere they didn't expect, to hear my story from someone else's lips, to realize too late that they had underestimated me. Choosing success as revenge meant choosing growth over bitterness, and that wasn't easy. Bitterness tempts you. It tells you that you deserve to hate, that you deserve to see them suffer. But I understood that holding on to hate only kept me tied to them. I wanted freedom more than I wanted justice. I wanted peace more than I wanted payback. So I let go, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved to move forward. I decided that the most powerful revenge would be to build a life so full that they could never touch it, so bright that their shadows couldn't dim it. I started surrounding myself with new energy, people who didn't know my past, who only saw my potential. I learned that sometimes the most healing thing you can do is to step out of the spaces that remind you of your pain. I stopped going to the restaurants we loved, stopped listening to the songs we shared. I replaced them with new memories, new music, new dreams. Slowly, the weight lifted. My laughter returned, softer at first, then louder, freer. Success wasn't just financial, it was emotional, spiritual. I was rebuilding from the inside out. Every achievement, every goal I reached, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they had tried to take. I realized that revenge through success isn't about proving how strong you are to others, it's about rediscovering who you were before they broke you. It's about standing taller because you built yourself again, from nothing, from ashes. When people saw me now, they saw confidence, elegance, calm, but they had no idea of the storm that had forged it. And that, in itself, was victory. The woman I became after betrayal no longer waited for apologies, no longer sought validation. She didn't need closure, she created it. Every dollar earned, every client won, every compliment received was another step away from the person who once begged for love. I didn't need to expose their lies. The world would see the truth in my success. They had chosen deceit, I had chosen destiny. And destiny was far more powerful than revenge could ever be. Building something unstoppable wasn't part of the plan at first. I only wanted to survive, to find a way out of the pain and chaos that betrayal had left behind. But survival has a strange way of evolving into strength, and strength has a way of turning into purpose. When I started my business, I didn't see it as revenge, I saw it as therapy, something to keep me from falling apart. I worked out of a small apartment, the walls still echoing with memories I wanted to forget. My desk was an old table, my laptop a lifeline. I had no investors, no mentors, no support. What I had was anger, focus, and a deep need to prove to myself that my story didn't end with betrayal. The first few months were brutal. Nothing worked the way I hoped. Clients came and went. Mistakes were expensive, and loneliness hung heavy around me. But pain had already taught me endurance. If I could survive heartbreak, I could survive failure. Each rejection felt like another lesson, and each small win felt like a promise from the universe that I was on the right path. I began to realize that I wasn't just building a company, I was rebuilding myself. Every design I created carried a piece of my journey. Every sale reminded me that I was capable of standing on my own. Slowly, my business became my identity, my escape, my rebirth. I stopped checking social media, stopped looking for traces of them. The silence I once feared became my sanctuary. I learned how to channel all my emotions, the betrayal, the humiliation, the rage, into productivity. I would stay up all night sketching new ideas, sometimes crying quietly but never stopping. The tears were part of the process. They washed away the weakness I no longer needed. And with every sunrise, I felt a little stronger. The same woman who once waited for love was now building an empire from heartbreak. As months turned into a year, my business started gaining attention. What began as a side project turned into something people wanted. I started receiving messages from clients who connected to the emotion in my designs. They said my work felt real, that it carried depth, that it spoke to resilience. They didn't know the story behind it, but somehow they felt it. That was when I realized that pain, when transformed, becomes power. The rawness that once embarrassed me became my unique strength. I wasn't just creating designs, I was creating a legacy out of my scars. Growth brought challenges. Suddenly, there were expectations, deadlines, people depending on me. I had to learn leadership, decision-making, and confidence all over again. But instead of being afraid, I felt alive. Every new challenge was proof that I had moved far beyond where I started. There were nights I sat in my office, staring at the lights of the city, remembering how small I once felt, how broken I once was. Now, I was building something no betrayal could touch. I wasn't living in reaction anymore. I was living with intention. When I look back, the $70,000 that was meant to destroy me became the foundation of my new world. I used it wisely, invested it carefully, and let it multiply. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the mindset that grew with it. I learned that real power doesn't come from revenge or wealth, it comes from rebuilding quietly, refusing to give up, and showing up every single day, no matter how heavy the pain feels. What I built wasn't just a business, it was freedom, independence, and peace stitched together through resilience. There were moments of doubt, moments when I missed the person I used to be before all of this happened. But I also knew that innocence can't survive betrayal, it transforms into wisdom. And wisdom taught me that the best form of revenge is to become untouchable, not by walls of anger, but by walls of success so high that the ones who betrayed you can only look up in regret. I began hiring people, expanding my team, creating opportunities for others who had their own broken stories. I found purpose in helping them heal through work the same way I had. My company became a haven for second chances, a place built not on perfection but on perseverance. Every time I walked into the office and saw people laughing, working, and growing, I knew I had turned something ugly into something unstoppable. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that everything they thought would ruin you became the reason you rose higher. That every cruel word, every deceitful act, became fuel for your fire. My business wasn't just proof that I had survived, it was proof that I had conquered. I didn't need to announce it to anyone. The success spoke for itself, echoing louder than any confrontation ever could. And in that silence, I found peace, the kind that only comes when you realize you no longer need revenge, because you've already won. The day they realized I no longer needed them was not dramatic or loud. It didn't come with a confrontation or a breakdown. It came quietly, like dawn replacing the night. I remember the exact moment, standing in the lobby of a hotel where a business event was being held, surrounded by people shaking my hand, congratulating me for my achievements, my brand name glowing behind me on a banner. I looked around and saw faces filled with admiration, strangers who respected me not for who I was married to, but for who I had become. And then I saw him. My husband. The man who had once made me believe I was nothing without him. Standing a few feet away, shock written across his face, his eyes scanning the woman he no longer recognized. That was the moment I knew the power dynamic had shifted forever. He walked toward me hesitantly, as if unsure whether he had the right to. His confidence, the same arrogance that used to fill the room before I even entered, was gone. He looked smaller somehow. Time hadn't been kind to him. The woman beside him, my former best friend, lingered behind, her eyes darting around nervously, pretending not to notice me. For a second, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered every tear, every sleepless night, every moment they made me question my worth. I remembered how they stole from me, not just money, but trust, love, and years I could never get back. And that pity turned into peace. He tried to smile, the same way he used to when he wanted to manipulate me into forgiving him for something. "You look different," he said. His voice carried uncertainty now. I smiled politely, the kind of smile you give to a stranger, not a memory. I replied simply. I didn't owe him an explanation, and that silence was my final revenge. The woman who once begged for attention now commanded respect by her presence alone. The power of not needing to prove anything was intoxicating. They say revenge is best served cold, but mine was served in calm composure. I didn't need to remind them of their betrayal. My success already had. Everything they had mocked, everything they had underestimated, was now standing in front of them, thriving. He asked questions about my company, about my life, about how I managed all this. His tone was part curiosity, part disbelief. I answered with grace, without pride or bitterness. I didn't want them to see anger in me. I wanted them to see freedom. The woman beside him avoided eye contact the entire time. I noticed how restless she looked, how her smile seemed forced. For someone who once felt triumphant in betrayal, she now looked like a shadow of herself. I wondered if she ever realized that the thrill of stealing something doesn't last when it's built on lies. I didn't need to say it. The way I carried myself said everything. The silence between us screamed louder than any confrontation could. Later that evening, as I left the event, I caught a glimpse of them leaving too. He turned once, watching me walk away. I didn't look back. I had spent too many years looking back, hoping, explaining, forgiving. That chapter was closed. The freedom of detachment is something no amount of revenge can match. It's when you no longer care about their regret that you truly win. After that night, I didn't think of them much. My life had grown too full, too meaningful. My business was expanding internationally, my work being recognized, my team thriving. There was no room left in my story for people who had once thrived on my weakness. I was too busy living the life they never imagined I could have. The irony was, everything they had wanted to take from me, security, status, peace, I had rebuilt tenfold, without them. I began to receive invitations to speak about entrepreneurship, resilience, and transformation. Every time I stood on stage, I looked into the faces of people searching for hope, and I shared what I had learned, that sometimes the worst heartbreaks are not punishments, but awakenings. I never mentioned their names, never shared the details of the betrayal, but the message was clear. No one can destroy you if you refuse to stay broken. And then, one day, I received an email. It was from him. Just a few lines, saying he was proud of me, that he had made mistakes, that he hoped I was happy. I read it, smiled softly, and deleted it without replying. There was no bitterness, no satisfaction, only peace. Because I had finally reached the point where their existence no longer mattered to my story. I didn't need apologies or closure. My success, my strength, my peace were all the closure I would ever need. The beauty of that realization was quiet but powerful, that I didn't win because I defeated them. I won because I no longer needed them. I no longer needed their approval, their love, their validation. I had become whole without them. And that, more than anything else, was the moment I knew I had truly taken my power back. Winning doesn't always look like what we imagine. It isn't about standing on a stage or shouting that you made it. It isn't about seeing the ones who hurt you fall apart. Real winning, the kind that settles deep in your soul, comes quietly. It's when you wake up one morning and realize the pain no longer owns you. It's when you can think about the people who betrayed you and feel nothing but distance. It's when you build something beautiful out of what was meant to break you. That's the truth I learned, that victory is not about destroying others. It's about rebuilding yourself so completely that their absence becomes irrelevant. For a long time, I thought revenge meant making them regret what they did. I imagined scenarios where they would see my success and feel the sting of losing me. But as time passed, the hunger for revenge faded. replaced by something much stronger, peace. I no longer wanted them to hurt. I just wanted to be free. The empire I built, the wealth I earned, the confidence I regained, it was all proof that I didn't need them or their approval. But beyond all of that, what truly mattered was how I felt about myself again. I had learned to look in the mirror and see someone who had survived the worst kind of betrayal and still found a way to shine. The process of rebuilding wasn't glamorous. It was lonely, exhausting, and full of moments where giving up felt easier. There were nights when I sat in silence, replaying memories I wished I could forget. But each time I stood back up, each time I chose growth over bitterness, I was reclaiming a little more of my strength. It wasn't about pretending to be unbothered. It was about refusing to be defined by what they did. I stopped being the victim in my story. I became the author, writing new chapters filled with purpose, discipline, and gratitude for the lessons I never wanted but deeply needed. In rebuilding, I discovered how powerful forgiveness can be, not the kind you give to others, but the kind you give yourself. I forgave myself for trusting too easily, for loving too deeply, for ignoring the red flags that now seem so obvious. I forgave the version of me that thought she couldn't survive without them. That forgiveness was my freedom. It was the bridge that carried me from survival to strength. The moment I stopped asking, why me, and started saying, thank you for showing me who I am, everything shifted. Pain became purpose. Betrayal became wisdom. True winning came when I realized I no longer wanted to compete with anyone, not even with the version of me they tried to destroy. I didn't need to post my success, didn't need to prove my worth. I was content in knowing that I had built something honest, something mine. There's a special kind of power in silence, in succeeding quietly, in letting your peace make the noise. I began to see that the greatest revenge story isn't one where you watch others suffer. It's one where you watch yourself evolve. When people meet me now, they see confidence, calmness, and control. They often ask what motivated me to build what I have. I tell them it started with pain but continued with purpose. The heartbreak that once felt like a curse became the foundation of my growth. I learned to turn every scar into strength, every doubt into drive. And slowly, I became someone who didn't just survive betrayal, I transcended it. The greatest truth I discovered is that winning doesn't require revenge. It requires release. When you stop carrying the weight of what others did to you, you make space for better things to come in. My life began to fill with people who valued me, with work that inspired me, with peace that stayed. I no longer chased closure, I lived it. I no longer searched for validation, I embodied it. My success was no longer about proving them wrong, it was about proving to myself that I was never weak to begin with. One day, while sitting in my office, surrounded by everything I had built, I realized something beautiful. I wasn't angry anymore. The betrayal that once haunted me had become distant, almost like it belonged to someone else. That's when I truly understood what it means to win. It's not about the applause, not about revenge, not even about justice. It's about peace, the kind that sits quietly in your chest and reminds you that you made it, that you healed, that you rose above everything designed to destroy you. Winning, I learned, is not a moment. It's a state of being. It's waking up every day grateful that the pain didn't turn you cruel, that the heartbreak didn't stop you from believing, that the betrayal didn't stop you from building something worth living for. And maybe that's the greatest victory of all, not that they lost you, but that you finally found yourself.